Imagine July in New England, and it's snowing. The crops are black, the cattle are frozen in the fields, and the sun is nothing but a pale, sickly ghost behind a veil of permanent gray ash. 1816. History remembers it as the year without a summer. The official story? A volcano in Indonesia called Tambora blew its top and choked the planet in a cooling cloud. It's a clean explanation. It's logical. It's scientific. It's also, quite possibly, the greatest cover-up in human history. Because while the peasants were starving, something else was disappearing. Maps, genealogies, and a global empire that supposedly never existed. What if that volcanic ash was actually radioactive fallout? What if the world didn't just get cold? What if it was silenced? Strap in. We're digging through the frost to find the radioactive bones of a lost civilization. Number 1. The impossible mud. To understand the lie, we have to look at the official truth. In April 1815, Mount Tambora erupts in Indonesia. It's the biggest bang in recorded history. Fast forward 1 year, and the northern hemisphere is a literal freezer. Birds are falling dead from the sky in the middle of June, and the frost is so thick you can't see the soil. But here's where the math starts to smell like a dumpster fire. Tambora is thousands of miles away. Why did the ash take a full year to show up, and why did it hit the most developed parts of the world with surgical precision? Look at the architecture from that era. You've seen it in old photos. Grand, Greco-Roman cathedrals and massive star forts sitting in the middle of nowhere, halfway buried in mud. Historians call it an architectural style. We call it a crime scene. Why are the ground floor windows of these 19th century buildings buried 10 feet deep in sediment? A volcano doesn't dump millions of tons of clay into city streets across 3 continents simultaneously, but a global reset, one involving high-yield weaponry, leaves a very specific kind of mark. If you look at the maps from just before 1816, there's a name that spans from the Caspian Sea all the way to the Pacific Ocean: Grand Tartaria, a superpower so massive it makes the British Empire look like a lemonade stand. And then, in the blink of a frozen eye, it was simply erased from the map. But Tartaria didn't just vanish, it was deleted. And the weapons used to do it? They didn't come from the 19th century. Number 2, the radioactive smoking gun. If you believe the textbooks, 1816 was just a natural tragedy, a cosmic oopsie, but nature doesn't usually leave behind perfectly circular, radioactive holes in the ground. Open Google Earth and scan the vast wilderness of Russia or the Great Plains of North America. You'll see them, thousands of perfectly round lakes, identical in shape, size, and depth. Geologists call them karst sinkholes or thermokarst lakes. Funny thing though, they look exactly like the Nevada nuclear test sites from the 1950s. And when independent researchers tested the soil around some of these natural formations, they found traces of cesium 137. That's an isotope that doesn't exist in nature. It's a byproduct of nuclear fission. So, we're left with a choice. Either a volcano in Indonesia can somehow manufacture man-made radioactive isotopes and teleport them to the Siberian steppe, or someone dropped the sun on Tartaria. Think about the world in the early 1800s. We're told people were getting around in horse-drawn carriages and reading by candlelight, yet they were living among star forts, complex geometric bastions that look like giant silicon chips from high altitude. These weren't just forts, they were power plants, frequency resonators. And in 1816, the grid didn't just go down, it was vaporized. But why kill an entire empire? What were they hiding that was worth burning the atmosphere? The answer lies with the Inheritors, the people who crawled out of the bunkers to find a world they didn't build, and a history they were told to forget. Number 3, the Great Repopulation. Imagine walking into a city like New York, Chicago, or St. Petersburg in the year 1820. You see massive marble skyscrapers and intricate domed cathedrals with gold-plated spires. Now, look at the people walking the streets. They're wearing rags. They're driving wooden carts pulled by starving horses. It's like finding a tribe of cavemen living inside a NASA command center. The official story says these pioneers built these mega cities in just a few years using nothing but hand saws and pulleys. Right. And I built the Great Wall of China with a toothpick during my lunch break. The truth is much darker. They didn't build them. They found them. After the nuclear winter of 1816 cleared, the Inheritors moved in to scavenge the bones of a dead civilization. But there was a problem. The old world was empty. Where were the millions of people who lived in these grand cities before the frost? Gone, vaporized, or worse. Suddenly, the mid-1800s saw a bizarre explosion of orphan trains. Tens of thousands of children, homeless, nameless, and confused, were shipped across the world to repopulate these empty, mud-caked cities. They were the blank slate, a generation with no memory of the world before the clouds turned black. They were taught a new history, a fake history, one where the massive, power-generating star forts were just military defenses, and the atmospheric energy antennas on top of buildings were just religious crosses. The lights were turned off, the free energy was suppressed, and the winners of the war began the greatest fire sale in human history. But some evidence refused to burn, and it's hidden in the one place you'd never think to look, the world's fairs. Number 4. The Temples of Destruction. Why did the world's elite suddenly decide to build temporary cities in the late 1800s just to blow them up a few months later? Enter the World's Fairs. Chicago, 1893. St. Louis, 1904, San Francisco, 1915. They tell us these massive, glittering white cities were built in record time using nothing but plaster and wood. Thousands of acres of high-tech marvels, illuminated by millions of electric lights when most of the world was still using kerosene. And then as soon as the fair ended, they burned them down or dynamited them into dust. Every single one. Why? Because you can't have the public asking why a temporary building has foundations 60 feet deep, or wireless power tech that shouldn't exist for another century. These weren't fairs. They were demolition jobs. They were the final cleanup of the Tartarian infrastructure that survived the winter of 1816. It was urban renewal via arson. Think about it. We're told the Great Fire of London, the Great Fire of Chicago, and the Great Fire of San Francisco were all accidents. Is it a coincidence that these fires perfectly targeted the oldest, most Tartarian sections of these cities? It wasn't just a reset of the climate, it was a reset of the human mind. The controllers needed to erase the tech of the past so they could sell us the innovations of the future. They turned free, atmospheric energy into a monthly utility bill. They turned a global brotherhood into a map of divided, warring nations. And if you started asking too many questions, well, the 19th century had plenty of room in the newly built insane asylums, which curiously looked exactly like the massive Tartarian palaces they were trying to hide. But the biggest lie isn't what they destroyed, it's what they left behind, and who is currently standing on top of it. Number 5. The ashes of the future. We like to think we're the most advanced generation to ever walk the earth. We have smartphones, satellites, and the internet, but look closely at the old part of your city. Look at those red brick buildings with the half-buried windows and the ornate masonry that no modern contractor could replicate for a reasonable price. We aren't the peak of civilization. We're the scavengers living in the ruins of a giant. The 1816 nuclear winter wasn't a natural disaster. It was a hostile takeover. They didn't just delete Tartaria from the maps, they deleted the very idea that humanity could have free energy and beautiful, harmonized cities. They traded our connection to the atmosphere for a coal-burning engine and a tax ID number. And the most chilling part? The plan worked perfectly. You can walk past a 1,000-year-old power station every day on your way to work and call it a post office. You can stand on 10 feet of mud that used to be a bustling metropolis and never think to dig. History isn't what happened. It's just the story the survivors agreed upon. We are the children of the reset, living in a world where the sun finally came back, but the light stayed dim. So, the next time you see a year without a summer in your history book, remember, the frost eventually melted, but the truth is still frozen solid. The question is, are you brave enough to start digging? That's all for today. If you've started seeing the world through the mud, subscribe, because once you see the patterns, you can never look at a brick building the same way again.